I'll start this video with a caveat. I'm a psychiatrist, and while I see people and diagnose them all the time, what I can't do is diagnose somebody who I've never met. So this won't be about giving formal diagnosis or anything like that. I can't do that in my professional capacity. However, what we can do is get some real sense of what's inside someone's mind, what makes them tick, based on evidence from their public persona and their behavior out in the public realm. And that's what we're going to spend time doing today, trying to understand what's really going on inside the mind of Donald Trump. Now, Exhibit A. Earlier this week, the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer visited the White House, and during that visit, Trump said this.
Mr. President, do you still think that Mr. Zelensky is a dictator?
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that. Next question.
And yet, only the week before, Trump had said this.
On his Truth Social platform, Trump doubled down. He refuses to have elections, he said. He's very low in Ukrainian polls. He then described Ukraine's leader as a dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast, he added, or he's not going to have a country left.
Donald Trump has branded Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator as a feud between the leaders intensifies.
A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move, got to move.
Now, all adults have a filter in our minds. We can very easily have a whole range of conflicting emotions and thoughts within us, but we have a filter that enables us to be consistent. We can have different ideas floating around in our minds, but the filter enables us to sort of pick what we think makes most sense and what we think is most coherent, and then utter those things. That's the difference between, say, an infant and an adult. An infant can say different things from one moment to the next that completely contradict what they had said at a previous time. But an adult won't do that. An adult will use the filter to impose logic on the way they speak in a way that makes it understandable to others and enables them to navigate the world around them. Now, the part of the brain that's often responsible for this is the frontal lobes, the prefrontal cortex we call it, which is right at the front of the head here. And that's the part that develops, actually is our sort of most recent evolutionary development in humans. It's the part of the brain that actually enables us to sort of filter and act maturely and consistently in the way we behave. Now, if we are to look for a deficit in Trump, it is that, because without this filter, without the functions of that prefrontal cortex, what ends up happening is that we become disinhibited. Instead of having the inhibition that people normally do, both in terms of how we speak and our thoughts and logic, but also in terms of our emotions and how we display them to others, without that filter, we behave very, very differently, and we behaved in a way that's known as sort of being disinhibited. We can be overly emotional as well. We can say things that people wouldn't normally say. We can behave in ways people normally wouldn't behave, other than very young children, if we don't have that part of our brain. Now, we know this because something happened in the 1800s to a man called Phineas Gage. And it was an accident that led to a whole depth of understanding evolving around how this part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, actually works.
On September 13th, 1848, a 25-year-old Phineas Gage was helping excavate rocks to make way for a railroad track on the Rutland and Burlington Railroad near Cavendish in Vermont. Gage was preparing for an explosion by compacting a bore with explosive powder using a tamping iron. Unfortunately for him, but fortunately for science, a spark created from the tamping iron ignited the powder, driving the iron straight through Gage's skull.
So the specific injury that Gage received was just that, a complete rod through that prefrontal cortex, that sort of frontal part of the brain. And as a result, it caused a striking change in his behavior. So a physician who assessed him shortly afterwards wrote some notes, and it's those notes that have been used throughout history for us to understand what it is that this part of the brain actually does, and how we could behave if it's knocked out, because people were just shocked that the guy was still alive. A big part of his brain was knocked out with a big rod going through it, and yet he was still alive. But some major changes occurred, and that's how we understood what that part of the brain actually does. It doesn't keep us alive, but it forms a very important function. And I'm going to read here from the notes that the physician made at the time about Phineas Gage and about the change in him. Now, this is in some Old English from back in the 1800s, so it's a little bit elaborate in the way that it's expressed, but you'll get the gist and you'll get the real sense of the difference in him. So what he said is, the equilibrium or balance, so to speak, between his intellectual faculties and animal propensities seems to have been destroyed. He is fitful, irreverent, indulging at times in the grossest profanity, which was not previously his custom, manifesting but little deference for his fellows, impatient of restraint or advice when it conflicts with his desires, at times perniciously obstinate, yet capricious and vacillating, devising many plans of future operations, which are no sooner arranged than they are abandoned, in turn for others appearing more feasible in that moment. A child in his intellectual capacity and manifestations. In this regard, his mind was radically changed, so decidedly that his friends and acquaintances said he was no longer Gage. So we know from that tragic but fortunate for the medical sciences accident that this part of the brain has a very specific function in controlling our behaviors, in giving us that filter, in giving us that inhibition that adults have in the way that we then interact in a mature and responsible and consistent and logical way with other people. That seems to be missing in Trump. Now, what can lead to that part of the brain malfunctioning? Well, the first possibility is dementia can lead to that part of the brain shrinking. So that's one possibility. However, we know actually that this isn't new for Trump. He's been like this for years. It's not that his aging, now his aging might exacerbate it and might make it worse, but it's not caused by his aging because he was like this a long time ago. Here's a clip from 8 years ago when he first entered the political scene.
In the disastrous Sean Hannity town hall, he seemed to reverse himself remarkably, like on the fly, and said there was a softening. Everybody heard that, and then days later he said, "No, some say it's a hardening," and it's just I'm dizzy. I don't know what to believe anymore.
So we know that he's had this propensity and this particular disposition for some time. Of course, it wasn't caused suddenly by an injury. We know there was no such injury in his history, in his life. So it's likely to be something that's basically inherent, that never really developed properly from his younger age. He's never really had that filter. He's always been the kind of person that sort of shoots from the hip and is unable to control his thoughts and emotions, so much so that he will say one thing one week and the next week he will say something entirely different, that is completely inconsistent with that, and believe it both times. Now, this mind of chaos is having and is going to have a vast effect on not just the country of America, but the whole world. Ordinarily, the most powerful person in the world who sits in the Oval Office in the White House has an impact. That person's brain, that person's intellect, that person's mental state has an impact on the whole world. But when it is disordered in the way that Trump's is, it will have an outsized impact on the whole world because of the intensity and the severity of the chaos that comes from it. So as a result, that chaotic mind is creating right now a chaotic world, a chaotic country and a chaotic world around us. We will be reflections of that mental state, which is a chaotic one. So what can we do, knowing this information, knowing that there is something going on there and that actually has an impact on all of us and the world around us, given the position he's in? Well, my advice is the first and most important thing we should do is stay grounded. Be grounded in reality. Know what is real and what isn't. Avoid falling down rabbit holes and pursuing the logic and trying to duck and dive with it. Just sharing with each other about what's really going on. Because the chaos can get deepened when we all start finding ourselves in running that roller coaster trajectory back and forth. Will he, won't he? Is it happening? Isn't it happening? But at least knowing ourselves that this is actually what was said, and this is a contradiction from that time, at least we know where we are. At least we can know where we are. And so sharing that information, being clear in our own minds about what reality actually is and what is happening and isn't happening, will be harder now, but that will be essential now for us to stay grounded, for us to get through this together as a global trauma that we will be experiencing as a result of this. In other words, we have to keep it together ourselves, even if he can't. So as a psychiatrist and someone who's politically active, and also write a lot about politics and philosophy and other things, I'm going to be producing videos like this in the long run for some time now, and you'll really help get these videos out to other people by liking and subscribing. So if you can like and subscribe, what will happen is that it will help us with the algorithms on YouTube and bring these videos to more and more people. Would really appreciate this and keep us talking together, building awareness, building an understanding about what's really happening and what we can do to make a change and make things better and turn this story around. Thank you.